Hi guys, welcome to this video and welcome to the Airbus A320-X from FlightSimLabs, recently released within the last couple of weeks and to much acclaim by the general public. Now, normally when I do a review, I do it in three parts. I do the outside in terms of the modelling and the graphics, etc. I do the inside in terms of modelling, graphics and some of the systems, and then I take it for a flight. And that's the normal process I've gone through for virtually every review. However, I'm going to do this one slightly differently, or I'm going to do this in different stages is a better way of describing it. And the first reason is money. What do you mean, money? Well, to the best of my knowledge, this is potentially the single most expensive single add-on you can get for FSX, short of buying joysticks, controls, whatever. This thing is $100 plus taxes. So for the UK, it's $120. That is an awful lot of money for a single aircraft, particularly when you look at it as FSX Steam, which is a 32-bit platform, and we don't know what the forward compatibility of this is going to be into whatever Dovetail Games produces as its next sim. So $120 is a big ask. It's been in development for 6 years, and it's a mega development, I'll tell you that much, but $120 nonetheless is a lot of money. And to put that into context for FSX users out there, the PMDG 777 is $90 plus taxes. The 737-NGX, which arguably is in the same ballpark, if you like short to medium range jet airliners, the 737-NGX for FSX is only $70 plus taxes. So, you know, that's 30% cheaper than this. It's only 70% of the price of this. And the 737-NGX is hailed as an amazing piece of add-on scenery and add-on aircraft. So that's the marketplace it's putting itself into, and that's the level it's pitching itself at. Now this thing had better be darn good for that money. You know, I'm not being funny. That can buy an awful lot of scenery and an awful lot of add-ons from other developers, particularly in sales. $120 is a lot of money to be asking for a product, so it better be darn good. That's the first thing in terms of breaking down the videos. The second thing, though, is the actual dynamics of the aircraft, not the flight dynamics but the dynamics. FlightSimLabs had developed this completely differently, and I'll give you a very basic sort of description from my sense as to how and why. A lot of add-ons rely on the default sim developer kit for FSX. Now that's fine for a Cessna 182, you know, whatever. The key thing here is that basically what it is a glorified set of spreadsheets, Excel tables and formulae. And fundamentally, if you plug the right numbers in, you get the same sort of performance. But when it comes to systems, the default control systems and the autopilot within FSX are garbage. So for example, if you were to take a default 737 or CRJ 700, depending on whether it's FSX, P3D, whatever it is, it's all pretty much the same. The default auto flight, the only way it can control speed is through auto throttle. It cannot control speed through changing pitch of the aircraft. And if you look at 737s and Airbus, when they take off, you'll see the various mode enunciations change, because when they take off, they tend to take off with a set power rating and they vary the aircraft's speed in relation by changing the pitch of the aircraft. That goes completely against everything that the FSX modelling allows. That means you've got to come up with custom coding. If you want to do it properly, you've got to come up with custom coding. That's why these aircraft, PMDGs, FlightSimLabs, etc., are more expensive. Is there are massive amounts of coding workarounds going into these things to basically say FSX is garbage, let's ignore all of that and let's do our own thing. The biggest example is Majestic, where they've basically gone and done their whole thing exterior to FSX. They take in the variables from FSX, they process them in their own program, and then they put the results back in and re-inject it to FSX. So there's an awful lot of custom coding. But then the next tier above that is where FlightSimLabs have gone, and what they've done is they've basically said, instead of looking at the aircraft as a complete package, let's look at individual components and let's code those components and get them to integrate with each other. And I forget that something they've individually programmed something like 80 odd computers or whatever it is within this, and then they're getting them to talk to each other, which is a phenomenal achievement. However, and this is the critical bit, I don't care if they've got 4,000 computers to talk to each other. I don't care if they've got 8 million, computer elements in this thing. What I want is to see what it is, which is a simulation. I want it to portray for me what I expect out of a $120 simulation of an aircraft. And at $120, it's going to have to be good. Now, as I say, normally I do outside, inside, and then the flight dynamics. What I'm going to do with this, I'm going to do a bit differently, because one of the key things that FlightSimLabs have put forwards is the fidelity of the systems, the operating, the handling, the flight dynamics. So in many respects, let me just see if I can... Oh, EasyDoc's playing silly buggers then. Right, there we go. So in many respects, whilst the outside is gorgeous, and it is, there's no two ways about it, look at that, that's absolutely stunning. What I'm going to start with is possibly the single biggest thing that makes an Airbus, which is in relation to the MCDU, the FMGS, however you want to word it. The exterior modelling is glorious. I'm going to make no bones about it. The attention to detail goes far beyond what I've witnessed in many, well, to be honest, every other aircraft, including PMDG. I've not seen anything come quite as, been developed quite as well as this thing has. Absolutely stupendous. And what we will do is we'll just go down here and look at the engine and look at the detail in here with the blades, and you can see through the background of the fan stage. You can see outside the fan stage to go through to the core. You can see all the way around it, the lighting, etc. I mean, this is unnecessary for what we're looking at, but you've got the wicks down here. I mean, tiny attention to detail, and it's absolutely glorious. Going to do that in another video for those who like their eye candy. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be concentrating on this box here more than anything else. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to basically do a walkthrough, talk-through tutorial, and as we go, what I'll be doing is I will be explaining why this is or is not similar to the real thing. Now, as ever, one of the things I like to do is I like to give you my source of information or my reference so that you know what the background is in relation to it. I qualified personally as a commercial pilot before I lost my medical, so unfortunately I never got a chance to do a type rating or to fly an Airbus A320. As a result, I, like you, have to go out and do some research, and this is what I've found. And this puts it all into context. This is the Smith's FMGS MCDU guide for the auto flight systems and for the flight management side of this aircraft. And as you can see, that this is the official document to the best of my knowledge. Now, those who are familiar with the high fidelity simulations out there in terms of aircraft will find that they often come with various documents. They come with tutorials and whatnot, but they often come with a thing called an FCOM, which is a flight crew operating manual, and it tells you all you need to know as flight crew about operating that aircraft, in relation to brakes, flaps, whatever it may be. And they're generally, 700, 800, 900 pages about that aircraft. They're fairly detailed. They're really quite mega things. The reason why I've decided to break this video down in the way I have, in the chunks I have, is because I'm looking at it specifically in this video and the next video with regards to this thing. This is the flight manual that is specific to the flight management computers. And the key thing here, the manual for the FMC alone is 703 pages. 703 pages. Most aircraft have that as an FCOM, but this is 703 pages. So you can see that there's plenty of information available, and I will put a link up to this in the description for the video. If you want to look at it in terms of a useful resource, it is very, very, very useful, but it's also useful as a comparison tool, and there are little things in it that I didn't appreciate until I looked in this. I'd been spoilt by the Airbus products from Aerosoft, really got used to enjoying them, but the difference is night and day, really, and this is proven to be very useful, both as a measuring tool, as a yardstick for seeing where it is in terms of the big scheme of things between this add-on, the FlightSimLabs add-on, and the real aircraft. but also as a tool for an aspiring pilot to really get to grips with the inner workings of this thing. So without any further ado, let's start to have a look at things. Okay, so the gross anatomy, for want of a better way of putting it, of the systems in an Airbus A320. There's 5, 6, 7 key chunks, if you like, or blocks within this mess that we can see in front of us, that really are pertinent to the operation of this thing. There's 2 flight management guidance computers, which are in many respects similar to the FMCs that you would get in a normal Boeing, and I'll try and avoid using the Boeing terms, but I might bring them in occasionally so that people who are familiar with, say, the 737 can understand a little bit more about what goes on in an Airbus. And they do have different design philosophies. And what I will say is this is the first add-on where I've actually started to see those different design philosophies in the way it works, and the attention to detail helps out massively with that. 2 MCDUs, which are your human interface and displays. Of course, the displays up here, the nav displays and primary flying displays, also have a lot of good information, as to your ICAS, your ECAM. 1 flight control unit, which is on the glare shield up here, which is your MCP equivalent from Boeing, and 2 flight augmentation computers, which are in the avionics compartment. Now, in relation to this, what I'm just going to very briefly touch on is the systems logic behind it. In effect, an Airbus A320 has a left-hand side and a right-hand side, and these two, the 2 FMGSs, talk to each other in different stages. So they will talk to each other in one of 3 phases. They will either be independent, so during startup, for example, they're both going to be functioning. You could both input data into both, for example, but they're not necessarily talking to each other in a fashion where they can validate each other's information or communicate with each other to synchronize data. So that quite often happens in the startup phase, but you don't see it much beyond that. Then you've got dual phase, where they're talking to each other, and one is master, one is slave. And then finally you've got single, which is where in effect one flight management guidance system computer fails completely, the other one becomes the master by default. What do I mean by master slave? If you remember on the 737 Classics, there's a little light for master up here, and it basically depends on who turns their flight director on first. They become the master. In relation to this, it's actually just basically simple. The left-hand seat is the master. So the interrelationship between the FCU up here and the systems, it all goes through this left-hand side, for want of a better way of putting it, and it's cross-checked, cross-referenced, and speaks to the right-hand side, which is the slave. So if you like, this, the right-hand side is this bit here, and then all of this is the master, is the easiest way of looking at it, really. Now, there are circumstances where you can deliberately make this side the master side, and there's a couple of ways of doing it. The first one is if you are an autopilot 2 with no other autopilot engaged. That will tell the systems, actually we want this to be the master system. And the other way of making this side the master system is to have all the autopilots off, no flight director on the left, but to have a flight director on the right, and that would make this side the master system. So Airbus logic, basically it's saying if you've got one system that's working, leave it well alone. If the other system's working, it can either check up on it, or if you put the switches in a certain position, you can force it over. But what's the point if this one's working? And you've got to follow that logic. I think it's fairly safe logic. So in terms of the cockpit and the aircraft, you can see down here, we've got a couple of little lights on. We've got FM1, which means Flight Management Computer 1 is not currently functioning correctly or working. And without further ado, what we're going to do is get the aircraft some power. Because without the power, it's not going to do anything. Now, what I need you to listen to as we go through all this is you'll hear the background sounds, all sorts of different sounds as we go through it. You can pull it out as a 2D module, which is nice. Then what we can do is compress and hold the brightness and it turns it on. You see the green flashing light means it's going through its power up self-test. Once it's fine, select the desired system. At the moment you'll notice that our flight management guidance system isn't available as an option. So in terms of this, we can go to our options, exterior controls, connect the GPU, connect the ground shocks, and that will do us for the moment. Then what we can do is we can just pop up here, put the external power on. There we go. And in the background you hear all sorts of beepings and noises, and you can see lights flashing as they go through various self-test routines. All really nice, and you'll see them cancel out as they go. So the elevator and aileron computer 2, for example, you just saw that flash out, and so on and so forth. So self-test there, all good, and you can see all the systems coming to life slowly. In fact, we'll just go back here, we'll just do this and we'll pull that out. Now you can see we've got the FMGC option available to us, and the first thing it does is it comes up with the status page. Now the status page is the first page that comes up, and what we're going to do is just going to mention briefly the Airbus logic behind the whole MCDU here. If you go and look at Boeing's a lot of the time they only have limited colours available to them. Certainly the 76, 75 era, they have very little colours available to them in terms of the MCDU. With regards to this, you can see it's nice and bright, it's got all sorts of different colours, and the colours do actually mean things. So, as an indicator of what we've got, the MCDU colours, if it's something where it's to a waypoint, for example a destination, they are coloured white. Modifiable data or tuned nav aids are blue. So for example, if you were going to put in a change code here, it would be blue. Non-modifiable or active data is green. So you can see we've got non-modifiable data here. We can't tell it what air rack it's got, it knows from what's loaded, so we can't modify that. Mandatory data or pilot action required. Good example down here is amber, GPS primary loss, because we haven't got GPS yet, and we'll go into that in a moment with the status side of things. And then finally constraints, max altitude, etc. are all magenta. So there's a logic behind the colour coding, and that follows on through here, and there's also a logic behind the colour coding here. So in terms of the modes, when we activate these modes, the colours you see up here basically are that if it's managed, i.e. we're telling the aircraft you can control the aircraft, you push switches, you give control to the aircraft by pushing them, and you'll see that things like the speed markers, etc. are magenta. If it's blue, it's under pilot control, and the way you get it under pilot control is you pull it and you take control. So you either give control by pushing, take control by pulling. Really neat system when you think about it like that, and actually in many respects I really quite like that system. You often find people referred to as either Boeing people or Airbus people. What we do need to do is we need to know where we are, so let's just turn these on. I'm not worrying too much about the pretenses of you know, turn, wait, switch, lights, etc. We're just going to turn it on. Now you can change the time it takes for the IRSs to align. I've set it to 60 seconds. Aircraft status is what it always fires up as. You can see now we're starting to get the information coming up as we're getting the details there. Still waiting for the GPS, it's still aligning itself, but what we're going to do now is we're going to skip across to the data page. Position monitor, not coming up with anything yet, so we'll just wait a moment for that. There we go, we've aligned. Or we're aligning, I should say. GPS primary, it's gone white. Now that it's gone white, it's live. We're happy with it, the GPS knows where we are. Okay, so position monitor. This monitor here, it computes a hybrid, what's called a hybrid position, which is a combined position in relation to the 3 inertial reference systems and the GPS. And what it has is it has a hybrid position. It has the position that FMGC2 thinks it's in and the one that FMGC1 thinks it's in. The reason why we've got these different modes is that you can see that these are each reading 3 inertial reference systems and a GPS. The hybrid system does exactly the same. The difference is that if you lose the GPS, FMGC1 and FMGC2 can also use details from the VOR receivers and DMEs, etc. And FMGC1 uses VOR1, etc. FMGC2 uses VOR2, etc. And then you've got just a single indication here of mixed IRSs, which is basically your IRS position by mixing all 3 IRSs without the GPS being there. So that's your basic position monitor. Let's go back into IRS. You can monitor the individual IRSs if you want. Let's just clear that warning, we don't need the GPS primary. And then we can go into the GPS and you can see the GPS here. For those who aren't aware, the whole GPS system works on the basis of time or clocks. And what they do is they transmit a signal, a time signal from each satellite, and the system will work out, well, you know, if this one's taken this long to get to me and this one's taken this long to get to me, and the difference between the 2 times is this, and then I add in another one and I get the differences between the times here, then I must be here. So it works out how far away you are from the satellite by how long that signal's taken to get to you, and all of the satellites transmit the signal simultaneously so that you can compare the distances. Very, very clever. Whoever thought about it is an absolute genius in my eyes, but there we go. But you can see that basically, in addition to the time, you've got various data here in terms of GPS altitude. That may obviously be different to pressure settings and pressure altitude, because the pressure setting is dependent on air pressure. This is just a fixed position, if you like, in space above the land. True track, and all the various details there, all very good stuff. But basically, at the end of the day, for most simmers, we're not going to worry about that. Aircraft status we've gone through. Closest airports is actually a really nice thing. It's present in the real aircraft. It does exactly what it does here. You get a bearing, distance and time if you're airborne, in terms of computing how long it would take you if you had to divert, for example, and the nearest diversion field was Lima Foxtrot Bravo Romeo. You'd have to fly a track of 203 for 12 miles to get there. You can input other airports. If you remember, blue is modifiable data. So if I put in Heathrow, it will tell us that we need a bearing 325. It can't give us a great deal of other information at the moment because we haven't got a lot of other stuff set up, but fundamentally you can put in other elements there. So yeah, all very, very good at the moment. Two things that aren't implemented, and I did lead into this, that there's a couple of things that aren't implemented in this. There's not many, I'll grant you that, but there are a couple. First one is equi-time point. Equi-time point is something that's used more commonly in long distance flights or flights over fairly barren terrain. So the obvious one is the ocean, but other ones include things like deserts or whatnot. And the equi-time point is basically a point where if you turn around, it will take you the same amount of time to fly back to your origin as if you were to continue on to your destination. That's critical in oceanic crossings, for example, because your fuel is in effect a time constraint. You only have so much fuel to stay in the air for so long. So you need to know potentially where the changeover point is, where you're going to be better off continuing than going back, or better off going back than continuing. And that's a key part of ETOPS, where you've got extended time operating periods for twin engines. Often you'll have a phrase like ETOPS 90, which means if you have an engine failure, you have to be able to get to a diversion airfield within 90 minutes single engine flying time. So equi-time point is that kind of thing, not implemented here. To be fair, I don't know if I would ever have used it in a sim. No real thing there for me. And print function, well, I don't print anything off my flight sim, my aircraft when I'm flying. I don't see an issue with that personally. Can skip across to the next page, and you've got a data index of all various things. This one here, secondary flight plan. One of the things that's missing is you can't generate a secondary flight plan out of this. I don't know why, but you can't. Anyway, aircraft status, this is where we started, and this is the key thing we're going to look at for a bit now. This is, in effect, all the information we would normally have at the start of this element. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a very brief look through some of the elements we would go through at this point. Now what we're actually going to do is we're going to put a route in, and we're going to use that as a combined tutorial and review. So the route we're going to look at is we're going to look at going from here, Toulouse, Lima Foxtrot Bravo Oscar, towards Heathrow. It's a fairly straightforward route, and nothing too rocket sciencey about it. Now in terms of initializing this thing, there's actually two stages to the initialization. There are supplementary procedures, etc., but we're not going to go through that. So the first thing really we need to go through is the power up and access, which we've done, and at this point you would check the nav database, so we're fine. Now as I mentioned, that this thing has been updated by Navigraph. I use Navigraph, but I believe it's probably also, or most likely also, compatible with Navdata Pro. I would however suggest checking that. So now what we have to do is we have to complete our what's called initialization A. So press that button there, init A. We're not using a company route, we're going now first thing here, you can see the amber. Amber means it needs a pilot input of some description, so we're going to go from LFBO, where's me O, to EGLL. Now what will happen as soon as you put this data in, it pre-populates a number of things, and you'll start to see that it can then ask, so you can't put these in until you've got at least an origin and destination. Now with regards to that flight number, we're just going to put a nominal flight number in. In real life this would be critical because a lot of things then come off that in terms of ATC elements, but there we go. So that's that element done. Cost index is cost index. It is what it is. It does what it says on the tin. Now the first thing that's missing here is normally when you initialize, you would have some lat and long information here, which you would then be able to slew. You can actually change the data that's on there because it's blue, but we haven't got it here. Now this is the point where I highlight the fact that this aircraft originally came into service in 1987, so it's done what, 29 years service. In that 29 years there have been a vast number of variations to airframe's software systems. You've got to bear in mind that in 1987 we were still looking at 8-bit computers moving into the 16-bit generation, and you know, the amount of computing power was pitiful compared to today. However, in addition to that, airliners, when they're ordering, you know, 10, 20, 30 airliners, they get the option to choose a lot of the facilities and functions available within the FMGS. So just because it's not here doesn't mean it's not in real life, and vice versa. You know, there's elements of here that might be not present in the manual I'm looking at, and there's elements of the manual might not be present here, but that doesn't mean necessarily that this is wrong. It just means that you know, against the reference material I've got, there is a difference. No biggie though. Init request is in effect a data link element, so we're not going to be using that on this flight. What we will add is our alternate, which in this case is going to be EVGA. We use that. Now, one of the things to be aware of is once it's in blue text, it's modifiable, but it can't be deleted per se. So in effect what we're doing is we're putting in semi-permanent information. What I mean by semi-permanent information is if I now go, actually, you know what, I made a mistake with that. Amsterdam is our alternate. I can overwrite, but I can't delete. If you look, can't delete, not allowed, which is correct. This is the correct behavior. We shouldn't be able to delete that. That option is not available in real life. Now, if our IRS wasn't aligned, we'd have a different screen, but IRS init means this is the IRS initialization and this is the position it's giving us. That data there would normally be the data in the variant I'm looking at that would be here. Now, an important point to look at here is actually, if you look at this, let's do that one, we can actually slew this. We can change this if we want. You can actually just tweak the overall IRS initialization position as part of that, and you can swap over here and go and do east and west as well if you want. So in the version that I've been looking at, that's present here. Not really an issue because it's on the next page, it is included, so it's not an omission, it's just a variation is the best way of describing it. So the cost index is normally defined by the company that or the airline policy. It can range from 0 to 999. 0 is maximum range, 999 is minimum time, i.e. fastest. However, the difficulty is obviously airliners are very conscious of money, so they choose a balance there. Now, in terms of getting access to that balance, I'm really not sure where the best place to get the cost indexes is, other than doing Google searches and internet searches to find out what people believe the cost index of, I don't know, Air France is or British Airways or whatever. So with regards to that, what we're going to do is put in a cost index of 30. Cruise and flight temperature, cruise flight level and temperature. Now here's an interesting one. The cruise flight level is fairly straightforward, 360 we're going to go at, and if I put that in as it is, it will go in without any temperature. In fact, I can do that just as it is and it will go in without any temperature, but it will compute what it believes is to be the temperature. Now, large text we've input, small text it's worked out. Now it thinks it's going to be at -56. We can adjust that, so we can go 360 and we can tell it, actually, you know what, we're not going to be at -56, we're going to be at -50. 50, and you see it's now big text as well. Now, a key element here is where do you get the temperature at the cruise level? You're going to have to go through Met charts. That's not a flex temp, that's an actual temp, if you like, an altitude temperature. So there we go, that's our cruise level and that's the temperature at the cruising altitude. You can change the tropopause height, which we're not going to bother with, although we are going to assume we're getting up towards that height. Something that's not on here, which I've seen mentioned on in the documentation in regards to the real thing, is at this point here you would normally have a white selector allowing you to select wind, and you'd be able to select climb wind, cruise wind and descent wind. We haven't got that here. Not really a biggie, if I remember rightly. Where are we looking? Is it aircraft status? Oh no, I know where it is. If I go here, you've got active flight plan winds. You can go in here and I believe that you can then enter the climb winds and so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is put a climb wind of 180, and we'll just see if it works. I haven't actually tried this before. 180 at 20, and we'll put that at what do we say, flight level 100. We'll see if it accepts it. Yes, it's supposed to do that, so that's happy, that's working. We're glad about that. We're also going to do 270 at let me see, 30, 200. Now there's no need to put this in if you want to do it rapidly. What you can do is you can just put it in terms of helping the systems, because this helps the systems calculate performance, costs, fuel use, etc. But obviously what you can do is you can let it work it out for itself. So 350 at 40 at 300, and then finally you could put in, we'll go for 300, bing bong, 300 at 40 at 360, and you can see it's put it all in there for us nicely. My understanding is it won't let you click the next phase until you've got some en route waypoints in. If there's no company route and you're manually putting in the route, you'd have to wait until you've got all of the route waypoints in, and then potentially you'd go to next phase. So we can check that later on. It's not really an issue. Go back to the init page, and we're still on init page 1. At this point, having done init A, which is in effect, as I said, if you remember, I said it's in 2 stages, init A and init B. We're now back onto init and looking at init A, and we're going to complete the flight plan page. What can we talk about with this? Well, the left-hand side is known as lateral revisions, and the right-hand side is known as vertical revisions, which, if you like it, that's LNAV and VNAV in Boeing speak. So at this point, let's just press departure, see where we get to. Now in the departure section you will find that we've got available runways, and with that we also get the runway lengths, and fascinating one here is you get these here. I didn't realise this until recently. These are the ILS identifiers for the runways. So runway 14 left, the ILS, its identifier is Tango Golf, frequency 108.9, and the course is 143. Fascinating that, so that if you're ever in a situation where you're thinking, oh man, what am I doing with the runway frequencies, and you're not quite sure for the ILS, you can just chuck this up. It's great, never really knew that. So with regards to that, we're going off 14 right. Now you can see the change in colours. Yellow means temporary, and you can see everything's changed colour. Green is active, or something that we selected which is active. So departure from LFBO, well, we know that's positive because that's our origin. Yellow means temporary. Now going through the manufacturer's guide about this, they generally suggest that you put in the whole flight plan as a temporary flight plan, whereas previously flying the Airbuses on flight sims, I'd put in the details, I'd go temporary insert with each stage. The reality is I don't know how that works frontline operations in terms of the systems and the techniques and the whys and wherefores of how they use it, but this is what Smiths and Thales are suggesting, so who am I to go against that? So what we'll do is we'll use the slew keys, these are called slew keys, and we'll go to the 5 alpha, and we'll select that, and you can see that we've got all of our yellow up there. If I now click this button, it goes to the temporary flight plan, and you can see now we've got the complete flight plan in yellow, which is fascinating. I've never gone down that route at all. So yeah, so that's us with the first part of our flight plan. Now a key thing that does come up here, can I move this? Yes I can. If we go to the ND, because I hadn't flown it this way before, look, if you look, we've got a yellow dashed line for our SID. It's also interesting to note that it's angular, and that becomes apparent in a bit, so I'll mention that shortly, but the angular element is quite significant. In effect what we've got is just like a 2-year-old joining the dots, if that. But that's our SID, so that's where we're going to start with. So then what we're going to do is we're going to continue down our route, and from Fisto we go to Barmes. So we're going to go to Barmes, Bravo Alpha Mike Echo Sierra. Just chuck that in there, nice and easy. From Barmes we're taking an airway which is the Uniform Tango 191, and we're taking that all the way to FSX. And then from FSX we're taking the Uniform Tango 426, and then that's going to DIMAL, D-I-M-A-L. Pop back to temporary flight plan, scroll all the way up, and then we're going to go to Alesso. And that is pretty much our route. So now what we're going to do is we're going to enter our arrival, and we're going to do the arrival, and you can see the same thing here. We've still got blue boxes that if we want we can put various lateral cross-track incremental numbers and waypoints in radial fix info. We've got all sorts of stuff here, but we're just going to go for the arrivals, and the arrival we're looking for is 27 right, so let's just slew that up. 27 right, and you can see that it's got various stars come up. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for the begin 4 Bravo via begin, and we'll see how that looks. Now at the moment that's what we've got as a temporary flight plan, so if I jump across we can see what we've got, and as I say, this is all just held, if you like, in the transient memory. This isn't into the system as a route, and just make sure there's no disconnects there, and there are no disconnects. That all looks really good. Happy with that. Of course, if I put this to plan mode, let's just change the range a bit, you can see we've still got all of this in its nice dashed yellow line, so we've not committed anything of this yet. So at this point what we can do is you can say, well, we're happy with this, we'll insert that into the system. So there's your temporary insert, and now you can see the differences. Our line has turned solid green to say it's not a temporary route or a temporary amendment, and now what we've got here is, if I press flight plan, you can see now the colours come in. Green is an input data that is changeable. We can change it, we can adjust it, but you can see the next waypoint is highlighted white. You can also see that we've got the individual distances between waypoints, and you can see the destination, the last line, is always in white with the distance and the estimated fuel on board. So this kind of last line is, you know, if somebody says what time we're going to get to Heathrow, well, it's going to be that time, and we're going to have that fuel on board. So it's really nice, and you'll see that as we scroll, that line just remains where it is, and we go through all the various waypoints. Now a key element here is, in terms of the flight plan, we do not have the opportunity to do a secondary flight plan on this. I've had a look at it, and I've had a look at it, and I've had a look at it, and all that happens is you get the not implemented. It doesn't seem to have any option for you to do that, which is a shame. At this point we're going to look at completing initialization page B, or Bravo. So back to initialization, it should then allow us to do this. Now the zero fuel weight we're going to put in, actually one of the things I noted is between the manual and this, they're the opposite way round. So in the manual, zero fuel weight CFG is over here and zero fuel weight is over here, but that's neither here nor there for us. Zero fuel weight. Now zero fuel weight CFG, I don't know where to routinely get that. I believe it may be something that's available in TopCat, which is apparently some program that allows you to compute. It's a payware thing that allows you to compute CFG and weights, etc. So generally, I will just let it do its default, and its default is to 25. However, the zero fuel weight we're going to use in relation to this is 58 tons, 58.0, and that goes in there, and you'll see it goes straight into there. And the block fuel we're going to use is 7.8. That goes into there. Now you can see it's amber because it's saying, well, we still need some pilot action. It will default to 25. You can see it's defaulted in terms of a lot of the other data going in. Takeoff weight, landing weight is all as you would expect. So this is all good. The only variation here, as I say, is this little thing here. So what we'll do is we will give it we'll put it out of its misery, and we'll give it a mean aerodynamic chord CFG of 25. So the interesting observation now is look at your flight plan now. Because you've got your weights, it can work out your turning circles, and this is a key thing, is that the turn radius is predominantly a factor of the true airspeed, but the true airspeed and the performance are tied in with the weight of the aircraft. So in effect what you had before was this straight line effect. Now, as you can see, you've got a lovely curve, so it's able to figure out, well, you know, how fast am I going to be flying with this, what climb gradient, and so on and so forth. So it's worked all of that out for us, which is really nice. It also means that we can now obviously start to cross-check data if we wanted to. So at this point, if we have a quick look at the flight plan, you can see it's now inserted the altitudes as well as part of the performance. So in effect that's all good to go, and just skip across here. You can see that we're getting all the necessary details and data that we want in terms of estimated fuel on board. So at this point what we can do is just pop to the RadNav page. Now you would set up some departure information on here, because obviously we don't like to rely on GPS, because GPS is man-made and therefore is fallible. And the second thing is, obviously, if you have to return, rather than messing around with the FMS, it's nice to have the data already in there. However, you can see at this point we don't need to put any data in. It's already recognised Toulouse 117.7 as VOR1 and VOR2, and it's already got our ILS option of Tango Bravo Sierra 110.7 with the course 143. So we're not going to bother messing around with that, because there's no need to. What we need to do now is check and complete the progress page, and you go, oh, complete the progress page, really? Now this page is pretty much exactly as you would see it in the real thing. So you've got your flight number up here, cruise altitude that we've put in at the optimum, which it's figured out is 350, and the weather conditions we've got. Now this one up here, Rec Max. What is Rec Max? Rec Max is, well, let's go through these two figures then. So that figure there, optimum flight altitude, is currently at 350. That includes, let me just get back to data, aircraft status. That includes that thing there, which is the performance factor, or the performance factor correction, I should say. But it also includes working out information from the cost index, your ground speed, your total fuel flow, etc. So that number actually potentially could change depending on the data that it's reading, but it reads from a number of sources of data. The other thing that's here is Rec Max, which is the recommended maximum altitude. So basically what this is saying is this is the absolute ceiling that they would recommend taking the aircraft to as an absolute maximum. And that's worked out on a few factors. And it's worked out on being able to maintain a stabilised flight level flight with less than your maximum cruise thrust. So your throttles aren't fully maxed out in the cruise. Your speed needs to be between the green dot speed and the MMO or VMO. Minimum climb that has to be available is 300 feet per minute with maximum climb thrust. So basically it's saying that you have to still be able to achieve 300 feet per minute climb. And then obviously your altitude has to be less than the aircraft's maximum certified altitude. So that is the theoretical altitude, that if you had to go absolutely as high as you possibly could, it's flight level 382. But bearing in mind up here the recommended minimum climb speed is 300 feet per minute. It's going to take you a while to get up to that nosebleed level. There's a nice little one down here. I really like this, bearing distance 2. So where are we going? Echo Golf Kilo Kilo. And they give you bearing distance to a point. So if you just put a nominal point in, it give you the bearing and distance direct to that, which I really like. In terms of GPS down here, saying GPS primary, required accuracy and estimated. Required is 1 nautical mile, actual is 0.09 nautical miles. So there we go. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much all of the progress page. You don't really need to check a lot. It is part of the procedures that they request as part of the check, but we don't need to really mess around with it. I suppose the elements here, the key elements, are going to be in relation to the altitudes for the pre-flight. Next stop is the performance. So takeoff page then. First thing to note is we've got green information up here in terms of the runway, 14 right. There's takeoff shift. I don't generally use this. Takeoff shift basically allows you to offset the start position of your takeoff. So let's say, for example, you've got a I don't know, 4,000 meter runway and it's undergoing maintenance, so the first 500 meters is unusable. So you've shifted the takeoff point. Then you would be able to put it in as takeoff shift and say, well, you know, actually I haven't got 4,000 meters runway, I've got 3,500. Flap setting, trimmable horizontal stabilizer is basically a tailplane trim, and flex to temp is if you're doing a derated takeoff, you would derate by a certain amount of temperature. So what you would do is set in a false temperature here as your outside air temperature, and the aircraft will then go, well, actually, because of that high outside air temperature, I can only go to this temperature with my fuel settings. And that's fundamentally how that, in theory, works. Now the problem is these two boxes would normally be provided during the working out for the CFG. Both the CFG and also the takeoff data, which would be part of the pack that the pilot normally gets at the start of the flight. Consequently, because I don't have this data, I generally set a fairly neutral horizontal stabilizer trim whilst on the ground, and temp wise I don't bother with flex to temp. If I had the data I would, but I don't have the data, and unless I've missed something here, please correct me if I have, I don't have the ability to do these two boxes. They obviously work if you do put the data in, because the tutorial has information for that and actually says that it would normally be provided by the flight dispatchers in terms of doing all this information, but we don't have that, so unfortunately we can't do that. What we can do though is say that we're going to do a flaps 1 takeoff, and that's pretty much that sorted. So there's the takeoff page, all bar the V speeds. You do need to check the other information, so transition altitude is 5,000 here, thrust reduction and acceleration altitude 1990, and engine out acceleration altitude is 1990. So we're quite fine with that. What we can do then is we can just select and double click and enter the speeds. And there we go, that's takeoff done. Just as an aside, in terms of the derate option, flex to temp, there are two methods of doing it. One is just to direct enter a temperature, so I don't know, let's enter 44, and that would derate to the assumption that 44 we're in a current outside air temperature of 44, and that would work out the engine maximum thrust setting as a result of that. The other option, which is different to this aircraft, is that some have specific derate settings, so you'd be able to go, for example, derate setting 4, and you'd be able to put that in, but this is a different system. So just because it says that doesn't mean it's wrong. What it means is that, as I say, there are different programming elements. Some will have this element, some won't. So I'm quite certain that the flex to temp works. It's just I don't know where to find the reference figures. So that, as a package, is absolutely spot on. You can see, having worked through it, just how few elements there are that are an issue. So we can now work through, go to next page, climb. You can pre-select, put the pre-selected speed down to 200 knots instead of 250 for the climb out, whereas the managed is 250. If I want to get rid of that, I can just click the green, and that's exactly correct. So if I put that in, in the real aircraft I'd put in 200 knots as the pre-select. Actually what I can do is I can just click the green and go, and that's correct. Estimated fuel on board at the moment is 4.2 because we haven't actually uploaded any fuel, and then you can go through to the next phase and you've got the same thing here, so you can pre-select the speed you want, and this pre-select will override the computed speed of the cost index. So if, for example, ATC wanted you to cruise at decimal 79 or decimal 77, you'd be able to do this by putting the detail in there, and that will change it, and the little asterisk shows it's changed, and if you click it, boom, you're back where you started. Obviously you can change your cabin rates. Moving on, you've got your manage mode. Again, obviously it's green, and in this case you can see that we've got a different structure here because, because it's including a crossover altitude. Now what a crossover altitude means is that there's a point where the Mach speed and the indicated airspeed cross over, and that's the change. It's normally about flight level 290, 29,000 feet, where you'd have the crossover, but that's worked out what the two speeds are would be relevant to that. And then you get into the approach, which we're not going to do at the moment because our assumption is we wouldn't know that information at the moment, and then you've got your go around details there. So all told, that's pretty much where we're at. The options now are we can go through and check the discontinuities, but I'm happy we haven't done that. One of the things I will point out is this information here. So on this page, a couple of useful elements additionally. This thing here, track 143, is the magnetic track between these two waypoints, between waypoint 2 and 3. So that's, I don't know where I would potentially use that in reality, but that's the magnetic track between the two, which is quite a bizarre thing. And the distances, it ought to be noted, are great circle distances. For those who are familiar with the idea, the great circle is in theory the shortest line between 2 points on the Earth. So great circles are a bit of an odd thing to try and get your head around, but that's one of the things it's working out here, is the great circle distances. So at this point, that's pretty much us good to go. We'll put that back on the performance, and then really now in terms of setting up the MCDUs, it's down to the company ops as to how to do that. And what we'll do then is we'll go back onto ARC on this side. What we can do is we need that one on, because we haven't turned it on. FMGC, fine with that. GPS primary, what we'll do is we'll put that on the flight plan, and we'll have that on the takeoff perf, and that's all the data entry up to that point. So then we come to the FCU, and we're going to set this up doesn't take long at all. So speed, we can just press, and heading stroke a lateral revision, you can see the dots underneath it. And speed is a vertical mode, but it's known as a vertical revision in the Airbus. So both of those, we've pushed them away, we've given the computer control. Now what we've got to do is we've got to set up our altitude in terms of constraints and level change, and you can see we've got vertical speed on the right or altitude on the left. What we're going to do then is we're just going to wind that up to 7,000, and you can see it's got the dot to say it's level change, and we'll just make sure that we press that to tell the computer that's what we want. So that's it, pretty much slow time. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to reset everything, and we will go through the whole process again. One of the things I'll point out at this point is you can see that as we've started to bring the aircraft to life, bring the frames in, we can see we've brought the frame rate down quite considerably, generally between 30 and 40, but generally about 35. Of course, if I move the mouse away, look at the frames per second now. Top tip, struggling with FPS, get the mouse out of the way. Look at that, it's crazy, isn't it? Low, high. Amazing. If anyone knows a fix, please put it in the comments below. Right, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a very quick setup, how I would set it up in relation to what we've just gone through. So here we are in the aircraft. We're going to have a run through and talk through as we go, and just in effect start it up real time. So the first thing we need to do is get a couple of batteries on, connect the ground power, things start to whine and fire up, and in the meantime we can start the ADRs firing up, and this will go through its self-test. Let's call that up over there, get it into line of sight, bring it over a bit, and we can turn it on. Not going to need to go through the options because we've already sorted all of that out, so what I can do is go back there, FMGC, select that, and you can see we've got the engines, the nav database. Now the only thing really as a simmer I want to check on this is the nav database. At the moment we've got the GPS primary lost, so that's not an issue at the moment because the IRSs aren't aligned. This will go white when the IRSs are aligned. So what we're going to do now is go into init A. Init A is going to be exactly the same thing, so LFBO to EGB clear LL. That goes in there, don't need that. The alternate is EHAM. Goes in there. Flight number ABC 123, just chuck that in there. Cost index, as we said before, was 30. Flight levels 360. You saw the GPS primary flash up in white there, which tells me that the GPS is good to go. So if we look down here on the ND, we should be starting to get some details. What we can do here is just click that to plan for the minute, bring the range down, and we'll see our flight plan build as we go through it. So all of that is fine. We're not going to do anything with the troposphere. So that is init A done. Flight plan now. From there, departure. It's 14 right, and it's the Fist 5 Alpha. Okay, so temporary flight plan, we're putting it in there, doing it the way that they suggest in the book. Okay, so next waypoint is going to be, where's my flight plan gone? Barmes, which goes there. Then from there we're going to go on an airway, which is going to be via the Uniform Tango 191, and that's going to Kazakhs. The thing that's slowing me down is my typing and the fact I've got a bit of paper next to me. If I was able to insert a full flight plan, it would be using the flight plan load facility, it would be much quicker. Uniform Tango 426, and that's going to Dimal, D-I-M-A-L. Okay, and then going back to temporary insert into the flight plan, and then from Dimal it's Alesso, which goes there. Then what we want is EGLL arrival. It was 27 right, wasn't it? ILS 27 right, and we're going to go through Big 4 Bravo flight plan. Now we've got that, you can see it's got the dashed yellow that we had before. If you remember, it had the dashed yellow because it's not quite in the flight plan. What we will do, I say not quite in the flight plan, not quite fully in the system yet because it's a temporary flight plan. So all of that we will just do a quick check as we go, and we can go here and we can go douche, 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 douche. Make sure there's no continuity errors, discontinuities. All the way through the flight plan. So we're fine with that, so we can temporarily insert that. That's gone in. Then we can do the rad nav. The rad nav, don't need to enter anything here. The only thing we're missing actually, ironically, is the ILS frequency. Oh, there it goes, it's just found it with a course of 143. So that's not a problem at all. So now we can go back into initialization B, which is to there, and then we can just clear that message. Just sidle over to the side here. So the zero fuel weight was 58.0. We're just using a mean aerodynamic chord of 25 for the C of G. Block fuel we said was 7.8, so that goes in there. Bush is all done, and all the figures pre-populate, so that is now good to go. So check the progress page, this all looks good. You can see we've got the same details as before. Don't need any of that other details to worry about at the moment. What we are going to do is we're now going to go on to the performance. So perf page, at the moment we're on 14 right, which is right takeoff shift not using. We're going to go flat 1, and actually we're going to put in a value of up 0.6 going into there. Flex temp we're going to use 55. These figures are drawn out of an example I had for this flight route. Transition altitude is correct, so let's upload the data, and that's that done. In terms of the phases, we're not too worried about them other than to check that they all look okay. Now if we go back to the flight plan, you'll see all the altitudes and everything are pre-populated, which is good, and you can also see the curvature is now there formed. So the final thing to do at this point really is just to check here, press, just click that so we can get the 7,000 there, press that, and that's it, pretty much good to go. The only thing we need to do now is make sure that we fire up the second system, FMGC, and what we're going to do here is we're going to just put that onto flight plan, and this one I'm going to put onto perf, and that's us pretty much good to go. So as we look at the systems now, should have all our bugs. You can see the bugs are there. Climb nav 1FD2 set up, 7,000 feet there, and our plan is there looking nice and proper. Just make it look a little bit prettier. We'll go to arc, and that's us good to go. Guys, I hope the video has been of use to you. If it has, please feel free to tick like, share or subscribe. Likewise, if you want to leave comments, please feel free to do so, and in the meantime I look forward to spending more time in this aircraft, and I hope you guys will join me for the journey, and hope to speak to you soon. Take care.